Welcome back to Our Time Stories. Yesterday we remembered the corner drugstore where everyone knew your name. Today, let me tell you about a love letter that waited 50 years to find its way home. In 1943, Margaret Sullivan was 18 and working at the munitions factory while her sweetheart Tommy was somewhere in the Pacific. Every day she'd rush home from her shift, hoping for a letter with that familiar handwriting and the return address that simply said, "Somewhere in the Pacific Theater." Tommy wrote to her every chance he got. Letters about missing her smile, about the sunset that reminded him of her hair, about the future they'd build together when this whole mess was over. Margaret kept every single letter in a shoebox under her bed, tied with the blue ribbon from her high school graduation. One October evening, Margaret received a letter that was different. The handwriting was shakier, the paper was water-stained, and it felt thicker than usual. When she opened it, she found not just Tommy's usual letter, but a second page, a love poem he'd written during a quiet moment before what he called tomorrow's big push. In that poem, Tommy poured out everything he'd never been able to say out loud. How he'd loved her since the 7th grade when she'd helped him with his arithmetic. How he'd dreamed of buying her a little house with a white picket fence and maybe a dog. How he was scared, but thinking of her made him brave. Margaret read that letter and poem 100 times that night. She wrote back immediately, telling him yes to everything, the house, the dog, the life together. She mailed it the next morning on her way to work. 3 weeks later, she received a different kind of letter. This one was from Tommy's commanding officer. Tommy had been killed in action the day after he'd written that poem. The future they'd planned together was gone in an instant. Margaret kept that last letter and poem in her jewelry box for 50 years. She married eventually, a good man who understood that part of her heart would always belong to a boy who never made it home. She had children and grandchildren, a full life, but she never forgot Tommy's words. When Margaret passed away in 1993, her granddaughter Sarah was going through her things and found the jewelry box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was Tommy's final letter. Sarah was amazed by the beautiful love story she'd never known about. Sarah decided Tommy's family should have the letter. After some detective work, she found Tommy's nephew in the same town where her grandmother had lived all those years. When she knocked on his door and explained who she was, the elderly man began to cry. "We never knew what happened to Tommy's girl," he said. "We always wondered if she got his last letter." That nephew, now in his 70s, told Sarah that Tommy's mother had died still wondering about Margaret, still hoping the girl her son loved had lived a happy life. The letter brought them closure they'd waited 50 years to find. Sometimes love stories don't end the way we hope, but sometimes they end exactly the way they need to, with the knowledge that love, real love, never truly dies. It just waits patiently in jewelry boxes and memory boxes until it's time to come home. That's today's story from our time. Tomorrow, We'll remember when neighbors were like family. What's your love letter story? Share it in the comments below. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that never get told.